Hi there. My name is Maureen McCarthy. I'm the current president of City Club's Board of Directors. The mission of City Club is to inform, connect, and engage our community to strengthen the civic health of our region. We emphasize civil conversations and listening to others. In order to avoid conflicts with the Thanksgiving holiday, our November program will not be the fourth Wednesday of the month as we usually do. We tried for the third Wednesday of the month, but our speaker was unfortunately unavailable. The day of our November program will be November 11th, Veterans Day. We know that many of you will be commemorating Veterans Day, and we hope you're still able to join us. The name of the November program is Sports and Resistance, Activist American Athletes at the Intersection of Sports and Politics. Our speaker is Dave Zirin. He is the sports editor at The Nation, and he also produces a weekly blog, edgeofsports.com. He's authored 10 books, including A People's History of Sports in the United States and Game Over, How Politics Has Turned the Sports World Upside Down. As always, I want to thank the volunteers who have worked and are working at this very moment to make this meeting possible. I'd also like to thank BTV Bellingham, who will make a recording of today's program available for their viewers. And as always, I'd like to express a huge thank you to our business sponsors. They are Larson Gross, Lummi Commercial Company, Danny Neal of the Moyot Group, the Opportunity Council, Pacific Continental Realty, Unity Care Northwest, Village Books, Western Washington University, Whatcom Community College, and the Whatcom Community Foundation. As you're watching today, remember that if you have a question, you can type it into the chat box that you'll find at the bottom of your screen in the middle. Click on that and write your question in the box. Then be sure to hit enter or return. We have volunteers monitoring that chat box who will pass questions on to our moderator, who will pose as many as possible to our speaker. Now, I would like to introduce Jane Freudenberger, our extraordinary program chair. She will introduce today's speaker and moderate today's program.
There. Am I unmuted? Thank you, Maureen. Okay. November 3rd is less than 4 weeks away, kind of shocking already. The expectation is it will be a very large turnout, and no wonder. Our country faces a virulent pandemic, a racial justice crisis, a fading economy, and unprecedented climate emergencies, just to start with. With all this happening, we want to make sure our vote counts, both at the federal and local level. All of Washington has been voting by mail since 2011 and should have it down pat. But with the expected large turnout and the drumbeat of misinformation concerning voter fraud, how good and how safe is our system? To educate us and answer these questions, we are welcoming today Diana Bradrick. Diana was elected as Whatcom County Auditor for the term starting in January 2020. Before this election, she was the Chief Deputy Auditor and Election Supervisor from October 2012. She's a certified elections administrator for the state of Washington, has administered over 40 elections in various counties, and has been an active participant in the vote laws statewide. Sorry, lost my place. In the statewide voting initiative. The voter registration project since its very inception. Currently, she serves on their steering committee. Diana is a Washington native, holds an MBA from Portland State University. If you have a question for her, I'll remind you of what Maureen already told you, that please type it into the chat, and we'll do our best to get to all of them after her presentation. Diana, the mic is all yours.
Welcome everybody, and I'm glad you're here. I can't really see you, but I saw that we had quite a list of participants, so I'm glad that you're here. We're going to talk today about will your vote count, and as Jane described, there's concern about that. There's misinformation, I think, out in the world, out on the internet. There's potentially some disinformation, and I think nationally, what happens is people talk about how voting works in other states, and that isn't how it works in Washington. So then there's confusion about what people need to do. So we're going to talk about will your vote count, how to make sure your vote counts, what the auditor's office is doing for this upcoming election, and what voters can do to make sure that their vote counts and every vote counts. So the first part of the process, of course, is voter registration. If you're not registered, you're not going to be able to vote. And there's two ways, really, to register in Washington. You can go online at votewa.gov if you have a driver license or Washington State ID card. Or you can mail in a paper form through October 26th. And normally I would say you can get those at your local library, as well as you can access it online from our website. You can also access it online from the Secretary of State's website. Libraries not being open, they're not, the partner that they usually are with us for us being able to refer people there. After the 26th of October, then starting on October 27th, voters have to come into the auditor's office. So again, you could come in, you would be served in person to do the registration. The reason for a vote law requiring a Washington State ID card is because that's how we get the signature. When you register online, you put in your registration information, but it clips the signature off of one that there's already there through Department of Licensing. So other forms of ID aren't available for online registration because of that. However, no driver license or Washington ID card, no problem. I think people are confused about, oh, I don't have one of those, I can't register. That's not true. There is quite a long list of alternate forms of ID, and I don't have them all listed here. You can also use a passport for one thing, although if people have a passport, they probably got a social security number, because social security number, the last 4 digits can be used on the paper form. So the most common forms of ID we get on a paper form is a driver license, or it's the last 4 of the social. But if you don't, if people don't have either one of those, or they don't know what those numbers are, there are other forms. They can contact our office. We can go through the list and tell them if you can provide one of these other alternatives. Native American tribal ID card also works. So there are alternatives, so that everybody can get registered. For voter registration, if you go to votewa.gov, and we recommend that everybody do that like now. So all of you can get out your cell phones and do this while I'm talking to you. You go to votewa.gov and you can check the status of your registration. You can update your address or your name if it's changed, and update a mailing address if your mailing address is different than your residential address. People, particularly who only vote every 4 years, and that happens. We get people that only vote in the presidential elections. And if they've moved, or something has changed, or they've got a different mailing address, their ballot isn't going to get to them. So the individual thinks I'm registered to vote. Well, they are, but they're inactive because their mail can't get to them because they may not be at the same place. So we really recommend, if you just voted in the primary election and you got your ballot okay and you haven't moved, you should be fine and you're going to get your ballot. But if there's any question at all, if you haven't voted in the last few elections and you haven't been getting ballots where you live, or your status has changed, everybody should go to VoteWa now. And that saves a whole bunch of extra work on your part later down the road. People who wait until election week, and as much as we try and get the word out for everybody to do this now, they will wait. And if that happens, they'll still get registered and they'll still get a ballot, but they're going to be coming into my office and standing in line in particularly in the days of COVID. So you're going to be in a socially distanced line, having to wear a mask, waiting for somebody to help you. If you go take care of that registration right now, your ballot will get mailed to you and you won't have to go in person to take care of it. One of the questions I get asked is, why would a registration form be rejected? If a registration form comes in missing information for new voters, they're pended, and so they're not fully registered. So they're in pending status in the voter registration system. And we notify them and say, you didn't sign the form, or you didn't provide us a complete address, or you didn't provide a piece of ID. And we're going to send them a letter, and they're going to have 45 days to respond. If the voter doesn't respond to that request for the missing information, then their pending status is pulled, and they're not registered, and they're not in the system anymore. If a voter marks no to citizenship, those registrations are rejected right off the bat. Somebody says they're not a citizen, they're not going to get registered. No information is going into the database at all. Another topic that I get asked about a lot is how we assure the accuracy of the voter rolls, or the voter registration database is how we refer to it. So one of the big topics is how and why voters are removed from the voter rolls. First of all, we don't just go in and remove people. I mean, and I'll go through this list. There are specific reasons why somebody is removed from voter registration. If the voter submits a signed form requesting cancellation, they will be canceled. And that's based on a written request from the voter. We don't cancel voter registrations for reasons other than the voter signed, I don't want to be registered in Washington State anymore. That's the primary way of somebody being canceled. If the voter is deceased and information comes in from an authoritative source like the obituaries, then of course their voter registration will be canceled. If an inactive voter has not voted for 2 federal elections, that's an inactive voter. So it's not you're an active voter and you haven't voted for 2 federal elections. It's if your status in the system says that you're inactive and you don't vote for 2 federal elections, then we do go purge the database. And that happens annually. We go back and look at the records and say, okay, and that makes the voter registration database, keeps it manageable. Like who we have in there are people that are active registered voters, they're voting. A voter becomes inactive if primarily, this isn't the only way, but the primary way that somebody becomes inactive is a piece of official election mail is returned undeliverable. So every election, we pay the post office to send us back undeliverable ballots, and we get trays of ballots that the post office has marked as undeliverable. And after the election, we go in and we update those voter registration records to inactivate them because mail has come back undeliverable. That happens when a voter moves, doesn't update their address, and the next election the ballot comes back. This is particularly challenging for college students who are very mobile, and they'll register to vote at the university, either at their apartment or their dorm room or wherever they're living at the university, and at the end of the school year or at the end of the term, they leave the university, they go back home, and in the next election where they get a ballot, they're not there and it's going to come back undeliverable. So when we looked at the February election this year, unusually was countywide, and then right after that was the presidential primary, and students that had registered for the 2019 general and then had left college, all of that mail comes back to us undeliverable, and we go in and we make those students inactive. So now the student is in the system, they're still registered, but they're inactive. They're probably not living at that address anymore. So if they don't contact us, go online to VoteWa and update their address, or send in a form or come in to see us or call and say, I've moved, I need to update my address. When we mail the next election, well, for the presidential, they won't get a ballot. If they're in the system as inactive, they're not going to get a ballot. So it's another reason we say to people, go out to VoteWall right now and make sure that you're in the system as an active registered voter. We send out confirmation cards to the voters, so we don't just make them inactive and we don't talk, we don't talk to them again. There's no communication. When they go in and they're inactivated, we send them a confirmation card to every address that we have for them. That could be the residential address we had on record, any mailing address that we had on record. So we send that confirmation card to all of those addresses. And if the voter gets that confirmation card and signs it, returns it to us and says, I'm not at that address anymore, I'm at this address, then we will reactivate them, update their address, and they're good to go. Another way is that we receive notification from another state that the voter registered there. There's a 30-state consortium, it's called ERIC, and it's a way for the states of sharing voter registration data, and it's using a lot of different points of information to say this is the same voter. And they were registered in Bellingham and at Whatcom, and now they're registered in Portland, Oregon. And they give us those reports quarterly. They come through the Secretary of State's office. Secretary of State, they filter them by county. They give us the list, and then we go in and work that list. We do the research that we need to do to say, yes, this voter is registered in another state more recently than our last update to that voter record. And then again, they're not purged, they're inactivated because according to the records, their address is somewhere other than Whatcom County. ERIC is a way also of determining, does it look as if a voter may have voted twice? Are they registered in 2 states and they turned in ballots in 2 states? That doesn't happen very often, but it will tell us that. It will provide information if it appears as if a voter is deceased and we haven't, our data hasn't picked that up. So ERIC has been really useful in helping us clean up the voter registration in terms of, again, people being mobile between one state and another. Voters who have inactive status can activate themselves, reactivate. All they have to do is contact our office, and they'll give us an updated address, and they're reactivated. They can go to votewall.gov and do it themselves. They can respond to the card we mail. So it's really easy to become an active voter again. And if it happens after ballots have already gone out in the mail, the voter contacts us, says, I didn't get a ballot. We're going to go look at their voter registration. We're going to confirm with them, well, this is where it stands. Are you there? Oh, no, I have a new address. We'll update the address. We'll get them a ballot. So that happens all throughout the election, through election day, basically. After registration, so voters are registered. They're in the voter registration database. We're going to mail ballots, and ballots are going to be mailed October 14th. The uniformed overseas ballots go out much earlier. They were mailed out the end of September. Those are registered voters who, they're primarily military, but not all of them. They could be students overseas. It could be somebody who's working overseas, so they don't have a local address. We have a lot of voters in Whatcom County. We have a lot of voters who are registered, but they're up in Canada, so they're in that list. And they get mailed their ballots earlier because it just takes that much more time for the ballots to get to them. And if they're voting a paper ballot, it also has to account for the return time. So, and particularly for the military, we want to make sure that they have plenty of time to get that ballot and get it back to us. So they go out early. Regular ballots go out on the 14th of October. I want to talk about mailing just for a minute because there was a lot of information and it's sort of died down now, but oh my goodness, the post office is cutting services, ballots, millions of ballots aren't going to get delivered to voters on time. And that isn't actually the case. Part of the communication from the U.S. Postal Service was really to election administrators to remind us what processing deadlines are. So don't try and mail ballots to your voters 3 days before the election, because under standard delivery timelines, it's probably not going to get there. In Washington State, we met with representatives from the U.S. Postal Service and from the state Postal Service representatives who assured us, and we believe them, the Secretary of State was involved, all of the auditors, and they said, look, you're going to get the same service you've always gotten, but here are the standard processes. Standard processing time is 3 to 10 days for bulk rate. It's 2 to 5 days processing for first class. That's always been their policy. So when we mail the ballots on the 14th, mailing the ballots means that our ballot vendor, we have a vendor that prints our ballots, prints our envelopes, does the insertion, and they deliver the ballots to Redmond. And that's the processing plant that Whatcom County uses. So on the 14th, those ballots are going to be delivered to Redmond by K&H, who is down in Everett. The ballots will go in the mail, and the initial mail is the bulk rate. Subsequent mailings are sent first class with the 2 to 5 day processing. So anything that doesn't go out on the 14th, when we do subsequent mailings as people continue to register to vote or need a replacement ballot, we send those first class. Ballots can be returned by mail, postage paid, first class, must be postmarked November 3rd. Must be postmarked November 3rd. That's a biggie. Pay attention to the last pickup time. If you take your ballot to a mailbox or into a post office, there will be a sign on the mailbox or a sign in the post office itself that says the last pickup time is 4:30, depending on where you are. It could be way early, could be noon, could be 2:30. So we can't give you a time because it's different all over the county. Anything deposited after that last pickup time is going to get tomorrow's postmark. So we really encourage people not to actually take their ballots to the mail on election day, but if you do, make sure that it is deposited before that last pickup time. If you choose not to mail for whatever reason, there's lots of reasons people use drop boxes, and that's great. We have 19 permanent outside drop boxes located throughout the county. And in addition to that, we have a drop box inside the courthouse. We'll have 2 temporary boxes at the courthouse election day outside. We do that every year for the presidential because the return is so high. And despite our efforts to get people to vote early, a lot of people just choose to vote election day or can't get it done earlier, so they show up on Monday and Tuesday. So on Tuesday, Tuesday is in a presidential election is really the only election where we see substantial lines ever, and there will be, and so we handle that by having additional boxes outside and staff outside trying to help the line management to keep that moving. There is a drop box at Western in the new Voting Assistance Center on Election Day. The Voting Assistance Center is new legislation passed this year. That Assistance Center is in the Viking Union building. And there are a number of groups, community groups, volunteers. League of Women Voters is doing some temporary boxes. Those are primarily on Election Day, and the communities that they're serving are being notified that this service is going to be available. They aren't official auditors boxes. They're ones that are being coordinated with volunteers, but they have usually they contact my office and say, how do we do this? And I give them the best practices, and we provide seals so the boxes can be sealed up and that kind of thing. So the ballots have gone in the mail. The voters have returned the ballots. And in Bellingham, for example, people probably will have their ballots Friday, if not Friday, Saturday. So we'll start, ballots will start coming back really quickly after we mail. The 14th is a Wednesday. So we will start seeing ballots Friday. If not Friday, we'll see them on Monday. When the ballots come back in, a staff of 2, so it's always a team. It's never one person. 2 people either go across the street and pick up the trays of ballots from the post office, or teams of 2 go out to the drop boxes. and they collect the ballots in the drop box, they reseal the drop box, they bring those back into the office. The ballots are run through a ballot sorter. That ballot sorter images the back side. Actually, it's imaging the back side of the ballot. So it's taking a picture of the side where voters sign, and it clips the signature. So we've got a full image of the back of the ballot. We've also got a signature. So then, before we do anything else with those, they're put aside until signatures can get checked. And we check every signature for every returned ballot. Every signature, every returned ballot. So for the primary, that was over 90,000 ballots. 90,000 ballots got looked at to have their signatures compared. The people who check the signatures are full-time staff, and we've been trained by the Washington State Patrol, by the forensic expert into signature validation. Some of us have been through that training. We get refresher training. I've been through that class, I think, 4 times. So we do sit there and look at all of them. The ballots are then run through the sorter again, and they're sliced, and the challenges are sorted out. So when we check the signatures, if the signature looks okay, it's automatically marked as good and it's fine. If there's a problem with the signature, it is what we call challenged for signature issues. And those challenged ballots are sorted out from the ballots going through the sorter. So now you've got groups of 140 ballots that are, the signatures have been checked, the signatures are good. We've got 140 ballots that we need to work. An opening board is now going to start working on those ballots. They separate, the first step is to separate the security sleeve from the return envelope. That's how we get the ballot away from the voter information. There is no voter information on the actual ballot. There's no barcode that ties the ballot back to the voter. The information about the voter is on the return envelope. So the first thing we do is remove that return envelope and we put it aside. They bundle those up, they put them in boxes before they do anything else. So you don't have a connection between the ballot and the voter who returned it. Then they take the ballots out of the security, they examine the ballot, and what they're really looking for is it completely blank? That's one thing. We mark those so that when we're adjudicating, we know that when we looked at it, originally, it really didn't have anything on it. They look at it to see if it's so damaged that it won't go through the scanner, then it'll have to be duplicated before we can run it through the scanner. And they're looking at it to see if write-ins. So looking at write-ins. So if the voter marked the write-in bubble and didn't write anything on the write-in line and didn't mark another candidate, the system is going to think that's a vote. So we have to mark those so that we can look at them. We mark the bottom of the ballot to force it to go into review so we can take a look and see if we need to do something with that mark. Most of the rest of the ballots go into the scanner and the system picks up all of the rest of the things that we need to examine in adjudication. So we scan by group. So the group of 140 ballots is scanned into the system, and they are not tallied at that point. They're simply scanned in, and we've got a group of scanned images, and then we do what's called adjudicate. And what we're doing is we're looking at ballots we're reviewing overvotes, undervotes, and write-ins. So we go in and we look at every ballot. It presents to us, these ballots have what look like overvotes. And if the voter, in fact, made a correction, then it isn't an overvote, and we have to go take the mark for the correction away. If it's actually an overvote, we do get those where the voter goes in and marks, ovals for 2 or 3 candidates. That's an overvote. We leave that alone. Undervotes, we look at those to make sure they're really undervoted. An undervote means they didn't mark the race. And we double check those. So we look at all of them and say, really, there's no mark there. And if there's not, then it's fine. And we check the write-ins. The tally gets run on election night at 8 o'clock. So we watch the clock. When 8 ticks past 8 o'clock, then we can run the tally. before I go on to the ballot packets, the tally is then, we upload that to the state. We fax a hard copy. They compare the tally results that we have on our hard copy with what got transmitted to them so that they can make sure that nothing changed in the transmittal of that information. It is not networked. The system's not networked. We put it on a flash drive when we go to a different computer and we upload. And the state compares to our written report to make sure that the numbers haven't changed in transmission. We also post the election results on our own website. So they're at the Secretary of State site, and we also post them locally. So if there are problems with ballot packets, it's most likely going to be a signature. Voters with challenged ballot packets are sent a letter. So if there's a problem with the ballot packet, so it starts with the envelope. We're calling it the ballot packet because it's not a problem with the ballot, it's a problem with the envelope. They're going to be sent a letter. So we're going to send a letter out and we're going to say, here's the problem. You didn't sign it, whatever. And the voter, and we're going to send a prepaid envelope with that. And the voter has an opportunity to respond to that letter and return it to us. If we don't get a response to the letter, we're going to call them and remind them. We haven't heard back. You can return the letter to us, get it back to us by 4:30 on the day before certification. We give them the date. So ballot packets that are what we call cured by 4:30 the day before certification, then we're going to count those ballots. The most common challenge reasons are there is no signature at all, the signature doesn't match, the wrong voter signed the envelope, and only one witness signed. And so we're going to send a letter back to the voter and we're going to say, here's what's wrong with your envelope. And if it looks like, the voter has an opportunity, particularly if the signature doesn't match, part of the letter says, if you didn't vote this ballot, if that's not you, contact us, because somebody else potentially has gotten your ballot and signed it for you. I don't know that I've ever had anybody call me and tell me that, but that's one of the options, and we do tell voters that, to let us know if in fact that isn't them. Usually a signature doesn't match because the voter's signature has changed. They don't sign consistently, or the signature has drifted over time, and they send the letter back with an updated signature that matches the envelope, because that's the way they sign now, and then we can match those up and they can get counted. Security is a big issue, and we take it very seriously. Secretary of State takes it seriously. I take it seriously. My staff take it seriously. It's a big issue. And because vote law is a statewide system, it matters that the Secretary of State is taking it seriously, because our voter registration database is connected to them. Ballots, in terms of ballot handling, ballots are handled by at least 2 people. Or in the case of opening board, they're working at their own table now. With COVID, I can't sit them right next to each other. They're working 6 feet apart, but they're in an open room, and observers can see what they're doing, and the supervisor can see what they're doing, and there's somebody in the next table over from them that's a few feet away, so they're not alone with ballots processing them. For this election, we're checking every drop box daily. In smaller elections, we tend not to go out and check them every day because the volume isn't there and it hasn't been necessary. But with this election, with the size and the concerns around it, we will be checking every box daily, at least daily. And the large boxes that get filled up will be going back out. They'll go out, they'll empty the box, they'll bring them back in. We'll send the collection team right back out to those same boxes. Seals and seal logs are used on all transports and ballot boxes. So we actually, the ballot boxes have a seal on the inside, a metal seal on the outside, and there is a seal log inside the drop box. So when a collection team shows up, they're going to cut off the seal on the outside. It'll break the seal on the inside when they open the door, and they're going to take those seals with the seal numbers and compare them to the seal log that is inside the box. And they're going to compare those seals and say, okay, these haven't been tampered with, they haven't been changed. They're going to take the ballots out into a transport bin. They're going to reseal the box. And so they're going to take new seals. They're going to fill out the seal numbers on the seal log, put that in the box, reseal the box. Now they're going to put seals on the transport bins. They're going to put the ballots in the transport bin, They're going to write down the seal numbers. They're going to put the seal log inside the transport bin, seal up the transport bin, and bring it back to the office. And once it gets back to the office, 2 people are going to check those seal numbers against seal log as we open up the transport bins. The election center has prox locks that require 2 people to get in. So in order for us to get in the outside doors to the election center, 2 of my staff or the opening board that have access into the election center, there has to be 2 of us. I can't get into that room by myself. I have to take one of the staff with me. 2 staff. Nobody else in the county has access to the election center. Nobody. Not security, not the executive, not IT. If they need to get into the room to do any work, they're going to have us go down with them. Nobody's ever alone in the election center. We don't have vendors show up and we bring the vendor in and leave them alone with the equipment. We sit with the vendors when they're working on the equipment. If IT needs to be in there, our facilities needs to be in there, we're with them while they're in there. We also get a report off the prox locks, and they send us those reports during an election, so we look at those to see if it shows up that somebody that's unauthorized was trying to get into the room, and then I follow up on that. The tally system is air-gapped. That means it's not connected to the internet, so somebody can't come in through the internet and break into the tally system. We have really strong firewalls. We're doing monitoring of the system. I'm not going to get really in the weeds on security because it's security, it's all confidential, but those are the kinds of things that we're doing, and I work with my IT department, and we work with the Secretary of State and the Secretary of State's Security Operations Center, and to make sure that everything we've got is locked down, so it can't be tampered with by unauthorized people. The election during COVID-19, people ask me, well, what's it like to do the election? What's different? Well, the election itself isn't different. The work is the work, and it's in statute. So we have to do all the things that we have to do. What we are doing for COVID is we're putting protections in place to protect staff and voters. So the normal stuff that you'd expect, we've got protective equipment. The staff are being provided with masks and gloves, and the room has hand sanitizer, and we've got cleaning protocols in place for the equipment and the workstations and social distancing. We've got social distance spots on the floor for when the public comes in. The public are required to wear masks. That's governor's proclamation. It's also a court order for Whatcom County Courthouse. They did that before the governor did his proclamation. The office right now is closed to the public except for minimal appointments. Anything that anybody needs to do for elections right now that can be done remotely. They don't need to be in the office. We do make appointments for marriages, and we make appointments for really complicated transactions and licensing. We let one person in. They're spaced out every half hour. Part of that, and I've had half my staff has been working at home and half of them have been in the office, and we trade weeks. And partly that's to protect the staff. It's also to make sure that if one of us does get sick, I don't end up with the entire office being in quarantine. Only half of us are going to have to be in quarantine. So we're really trying to limit exposure, because what, of course, we don't want is for any of the election staff, and the rest of my office works the election as well. It's all hands on deck. You know, we want to make sure that people are going to be available to get us through the election. We do open the doors starting on the 14th. That's when ballots go in the mail. So we'll start having in-person services, but again, we're limiting who can come in. So we have a greeter at the door. We've got plexiglass up to protect between us and the voter. As much as we can do without having the person come in the office, we do. And we're having people wait out in the rotunda area to collect their ballots, for example, so they're not congregating in the office and standing and waiting in the office. My office space is not very big. We are limiting observers. So that's different. And if you've been in the election center, if you've been an observer and you know what the election center looks like, we have nice space, but the way that we've typically set the workspace up, we've been able to put 4 tables right together and 4 people are sitting right there, and it hasn't taken up as big of a footprint. The minute that we had to spread everything out 6 feet, all of a sudden, I don't have the same space for people to work, but I'm in an election that's twice as large as a normal general election. So it doesn't leave a lot of room for observers and to have them be protected and to have my staff be protected. So we've notified the League of Women Voters and the two parties and the lead observers for the parties have been notified, and we're limiting observers to one from each party in each room except signature verification. So where opening board is, and then we've taken over the vault that's connected to it for opening board. So we've actually got 2 workrooms, and we can have 2 observers in each room. And we've taken over the IT training room. That's where ballot intake will be. If somebody wants to sit there and watch the collection teams take ballots and put them into trays, they can sit in there and watch that. And one person upstairs watching signature verification. So there are opportunities. Now, the other thing that we're doing, and I'm in the process of getting webcams put in, and the facilities and IT and the vendor tell us that they can have this done in time for the by the 14th, is that people will have an observation opportunity not in the office. And we will be training 4 cameras, I think. So you could see the ballot sorter, you can see the opening board, you can see ballot scanning, and you can see adjudication. So that's new, and we think that's going to help with people that want to be able to observe. And maybe people that want to observe don't necessarily want to come sit in a closed room with a bunch of other people either. So this will give people an opportunity. It's also the way that we're doing the canvas board meetings. We did that for the primary. It was done remotely, not with webcams, but through GoToMeeting. So we set up a GoToMeeting. We post the link out on our website. The board member is working at home. My prosecutor is working at home. I'm usually in the office, but the 3 of us are on this GoToMeeting, and Amy is projecting the ballots with the signatures. So when we do signature checking, anything that Canvas Board needs to look at is being projected so they can see it on their computer, and observers can see what it is we're looking at and what's being discussed. So that's how we're doing the Canvas Board meetings. Okay, what can you do? One thing you can do is be ambassadors for this process. I know that how we get the word out to voters, we do what we can do, and I'm doing press releases, and we've got a website, and, we talk to people, but I also know that I have a whole lot of ambassadors out there that are going out and spreading the word and are saying to other people, register now, go on to VoteWa and check to make sure. And the more of that I have people that can go out and talk about, here are the facts. Yes, you can trust the mail, but you can use drop boxes. Here's what you need to do. I heard somebody thought, a person had moved here from another state, and the person from the other state that moved here had been told the way that you register to vote is through DOL, and DOL, because it's only doing work by appointments, it was like, how am I going to get registered to vote? I can't even get an appointment at DOL, because they didn't know that they could go online. They couldn't do it online because they didn't have a Washington driver license, but they could have gone online and printed off a registration form, and they didn't know that. So, or come to the auditor's office. I've heard stuff that, I've seen stuff that said, the auditor's office is closed, they're not open to the public. Well, we're not right now, but we will be during the key period after ballots go in the mail. The office will be open. So if people need to come in for services, they'll be able to come in for services. If people that aren't registered, it's like register now. Don't wait until election week to get registered. Register now. To be counted, return your ballot in a ballot drop box by 8 election day. In the mail, make sure it's postmarked by election day. It breaks my heart to have the ballots come in late. We really do want to count every ballot, and we get hundreds of them, and it's sad. So we need good postmarks. Sign your ballot envelope. There's ways to fix it if you sign the wrong envelope. And we get calls all the time from husbands and wives who have signed each other's envelope. And if they call us before if they catch it and they call us, we just tell them cross out the signature and re-sign with your signature. If they sign each other's envelope and they send it to us, we can match those up and we can fix it. But sometimes we have a family, so there's more than the husband and wife in the house, and there's other family members, and they've signed each other's envelopes, and one of them maybe didn't vote at all. They're going to get letters, and there's a way to fix it. But if you look at the envelope and make sure what you're signing has your name printed on it to start with, then you won't have to do a cure thing. So that's kind of a big one. If you've got two signatures, if you've got a professional signature and a casual signature or something, and you're not sure which one we have on file, you can sign the envelope twice, because we keep all those. We have a lot of voters we have multiple signatures for, so that we can try and match them up. Receive a challenge letter, return it by the due date. People think, you know, it's all over but the shouting. They get the letter potentially after election day because they didn't deposit their ballot until Monday or Tuesday election week, and they get the letter after election day, and it's like, well, I don't need to return it because the election's over. Well, maybe not. Races that are really close. I mean, we've done recounts in the last 2 years, 3 years, that were so close, those cure letters potentially were going to make a difference in the outcome. So anybody that says to me, my vote doesn't count, you know, if it's not going to get counted until after election day, it's not going to count, not true. It really matters. So turn in the letter. And contact my office if you haven't received a ballot by October 21st. That's a week after we mail. And we really want people to notify us, because if they didn't get it, it could be that it's delayed in the mail for some reason, but we really want to know, because we can go check that we have the right address. We can get you another ballot posted right away and to make sure that you're going to get a ballot on time. So again, you're not having to come in the office in person to take care of it later. You can call the office, you can come into the office, you can request a replacement. My dog ate it. My daughter had a crayon and drew on it. You know, it got torn up accidentally, whatever. I spilled my coffee on it. They can get replacement ballots. You can go to VoteWA and request one. You can go to VoteWA and access your online ballot. You can go to VoteWA and request us to mail a replacement ballot. You can call us, or you can come into the office. So that's the thing about replacement ballots. Now, the deal about replacement ballots is people get freaked out. Oh, you sent the voter 2 ballots. Well, the minute you get a replacement ballot, or the minute you access your online ballot, the original one just got canceled. So if we went in and looked at your voter history, it would say, well, we mailed you one on the 14th. It got canceled on the 20th because you accessed an online ballot. So only one ballot is going to get counted. You know, if you turn both of them in, if we mail you one and you do a VoteWA one and you turn both of them in, well, one of them's going to have ended up being canceled. So it wouldn't even, it would go through the system and it would get caught when it was scanned. This is a canceled ballot, and it's going to spit it out. So you really can't vote 2 ballots. People get concerned about that, and it's like, yeah, the system tracks that, and you can't do it. I mean, you can access multiple ballots, but they're going to cancel each other. We've gone in and run tests on ourselves. All of the staff, we've got these voter histories with all these canceled ballots, because we go in and see what happens. Key dates. The 14th is when ballots get mailed, and the drop boxes are available starting on the 14th. 21st, contact the auditor if you haven't received a ballot by that date. 26th is the last day for online registration or mailed forms, and the mail form has to be received, not postmarked, by the 26th. The 27th, USPS recommends mailing your ballot by this date. That's their official recommendation. Mail your ballot by the 27th if you're going to mail it. On the 27th, voters need to come to the office to register or update. On the 27th is the last day we will mail ballots. The 30th, because we want to make sure it's going to get to you. So that's the timeline for us. You know, you can still get a ballot, but you're going to have to come in, or you can go to VoteWA and print it off. On the 31st, that's a Saturday. The office is open from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. for customer service, for all services. So for people that can't get into our office during the week because they're working, they could come in on that Saturday. The 3rd is election day. Ballots have to be postmarked or in the box by 8 p.m. And we are registering voters right up until 8 o'clock. So if people are in line at 8, they will get served until we get everybody taken care of. Just like at a drop box. You're in line at the drop box by 8 o'clock. The team at the drop box keeps track. They're watching their clock, the last car in line, they mark the car. All of those people do get to deposit their ballots. I saw a piece of misinformation that said, oh, the staff were allowing late ballots. No, they're not. If people were in line, it doesn't matter if it took until 8:05 to get to the drop box. If they were in line by 8, they're still good. Challenge letters are due by 4:30 on the 23rd. And the election is certified on the 24th. So that's a whole lot of information. And here's contact information for myself, for the auditor's office. The main number is 5100 just for my office. Election specifically is 778-5102. So that's what I have. And if there probably are questions, so if people have questions, I will try and answer those.
So I just wanted to ask, in all the years you've been working with this mail-only system of voting, what percentage of fraud have you encountered and what did it consist of?
Well, practically zero, actually. It isn't totally zero, but let's see. Well, let me give you a stat from the state. I don't know that it might help. So a statistic from the state that Secretary of State Wyman used recently in a presentation she did said that, I think it was in 2000, was it a 2018? I think it was a 2018 number. In 2018, over 3 million ballots got turned in statewide. So it was 3.6 or something. I don't remember the numbers exactly. Out of that 3.6, what they were able to put together using ERIC and other tools to see if people had voted twice was something like 132 ballots statewide. 132 ballots statewide.
Okay.
And 6 of those, 6 of them were sent, these were potential frauds. 6 of them were sent to Whatcom County. One of them, I went in and took a look at it, and in fact, the signature on the envelope wasn't the voter, so the signature didn't match. So it looked like that voter had voted twice, but in fact, it wasn't that voter that had voted the second envelope, so that was one of them. One of them was an elderly lady who had moved from Bellingham to some other state and didn't remember, in fact, that didn't remember that she'd voted her Whatcom County ballot and also voted in the other state. It's that kind of thing. One person didn't realize, it happens with young people in particular, she'd moved and didn't realize that it was illegal for her not to vote in both states. So they weren't trying to vote twice in Whatcom, they were voting because they'd moved. So
Sure.
that's what we see. And because the system is the way it is now, and it's so transparent for us to be able to go in and see that voters are moving from county to county, and we're matching up. So the system is matching up and saying, this is a potential match. So when we register voters, if I put in a voter and it includes their birth date and their social, their driver license, and we run what is called run checks, it runs and checks against DOL and it checks against the state site, and we'll get a report at the bottom. It'll say this appears to be a match.
Mm-hmm.
And it'll tell us if this is somebody who's voted that also has a record that needs to be merged, for example, so that voter can't be in the system twice. They can't be registered in Whatcom County and also be registered in King County, because the system is going to catch same person, same birth date, same driver license, whatever it is. So that's one of the beauties of what VoteWall has done for us. And it also, as I was describing, keeps them from turning in, printing off multiple ballots. I mean, that would be one thing. People get concerned. They think trying to turn in multiple ballots is fraudulent because they can. Well, you sent them more than one. Yes, but when I sent them the second one, it canceled the first one. So you really can't do it in the system. So really not fraud.
That's good to hear. And certainly listening to what you've been saying, we and your process sounds really unbelievably secure. Is there a list of ballot boxes in the county so people would know where the one is in Ferndale and wherever?
So there's all kinds of ways that people can access. They can go out to the Whatcom County Auditor's website. If they go to elections and look under voters, on the voter page, there'll be a question that says, I want to locate a drop box. There's a list there. Okay. There will be a list in the insert. There's a list in the insert in the ballot packet. There's a list in the voter guide that will be mailed to every household. And if you go out to votewa.gov and look up your record, it will tell you what the closest drop box to your house is. Which you can also see all of the drop boxes in the county, but you can find the one closest to you. So there's a lot of options.
Okay, sounds good. So here's one from the chat box. It says, what happens to ballots that are requested early and mailed in early? I have neighbors who mailed theirs a couple of weeks ago and they can't see on votewa.gov if the ballots have been received yet. When will that website show they have been received?
Yeah, if anybody's voting early, those ballots are being held in a secure vault. They're not processed. We don't start processing early ballots. So we've got a lot of ballots from the military overseas voters, and they have not been checked in. We don't start processing until the week we send ballots out. So that's why they're not seeing it, because we'd have to take them and run them through the scanner. And, you know, there's very few that had come in early from local people. We have a lot of the military overseas voters because they are able to return theirs by email. So we have like 600 of them, I think.
Okay.
And they'll start being processed next week.
Well, I want to go back to what you were talking about before because you mentioned ERIC again, and we got a question saying, what does ERIC stand for? I assume it's initials that stand for something.
Yeah, it does. It's an acronym, and I stopped the auditor time because I don't remember what the initials stand for. We just always called it ERIC, but it's like, I think the C stands for consortium. I think it's election registration information consortium, I think. And
Sounds
it's
good.
30 states. You know, if you sign on as a state, then you are committing the state to certain things. So part of, you know, so Washington signed on quite early. And, you know, you're committing to, okay, when we get these reports from ERIC, we are going to respond to those. We're going to turn them around, and there's a timeline in there that says you get an ERIC report and it's supposed to be done within this amount of time. You don't just get these reports and go, oh, we don't have time to work them, we're not going to do this. So there's a commitment. And so some states didn't join on, you know, immediately because they didn't want to, you know, commit to that. There's also a second consortium, and so some of the states belong to a second one. So there's like two different consortiums, but they're basically doing the same thing. They're cross-checking data.
And you said there were 30 states that had signed on to this? 30?
Yeah, 30 states in ERIC, including Oregon, all of our local, you know, Northwest. Frankly, I think California finally did join. That was the big one that we really wanted California to join, and for a long time they didn't. Oregon joined early. Because the vote by mail states, they all got in really early because of, you know, the way that we have vote by mail. So, yeah.
So obviously all the states aren't vote by mail, but we got a question asking, is there a lot of variation between different county, how they handle ballots, and between different states? Sorting machines we've heard a lot about lately.
One of the benefits in Washington State that's different from Oregon and I think Hawaii is that we go for a postmark, not it has to be received. So in Oregon, your ballot has to be received. That means if you're mailing it, you better figure out how long it's going to take for the ballot to you know, delivery. In Washington, you don't. If you pay attention to the cutoff time and you know you're going to get a good postmark, then you're good. So people that are worried about delivery time, and again in Washington State, they're worried about delivery time with the mail, and it's like, well, you don't really have to worry about that it's going to take 5 days or 7 days to get here. What you need to worry about is that you got it deposited someplace where it gets today's postmark or tomorrow's postmark, and that's before the election, and then you're good. And if we don't get, because one of our biggest mail days is Wednesday. It's the day after the election. It's from people mailing on Monday and Tuesday. So, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So here's another question from the chat, and she says, my mother can't sign her name, and my brother has power of attorney. Can she sign the ballot, and does this require witnesses or?
Yes, the power of attorney can't sign. Well, I mean, the power of attorney can't sign as a power of attorney. Her son can be a witness. So she can make a mark of any kind,
Mm-hmm.
squiggle, X, anything. 2 witnesses can sign it, and one of them can be her son, who's her power of attorney. What her son can't do, we get these occasionally, and we started putting it on the envelope. Powers of attorney can't do it because we were getting envelopes where the person signed Diana Bradrick, power of attorney, and it was the only witness signature, and that's not acceptable. So it needs to be a second signature.
Okay. All right. Let's see. So the online process for registration is really terrific. And only if you have a Washington State driver's license. Now, you mentioned other identification. Will a voter ever be able to use his or her Social Security to register? They can on a hard copy, but not on the online?
Right, because the point of the Washington ID is that it pulls your signature. If you only used a Social Security number, it doesn't have any place to get your signature from, so now you've got an unsigned registration form. So that's the tie-in between DOL and driver license and Washington ID, is that it can pull your signature.
And so anything else that has your signature, like student ID or something like that, that has signature wouldn't work? It's only driver license.
Yeah, you can't do it online because the online system, there's no repository for those signatures for the registration to check against.
Okay.
I mean, that's what VOWA is doing, is it's linked with DOL so that it can pull the signature from DOL. But with student ID cards or Native American tribal ID, that can be used as ID. It can't be used as ID online because there's not a central repository for us to link to pull signatures.
Oh, I see. That makes sense. So somebody, I have to tell you this in the middle of the question, somebody sent in that Whatcom has to be the best elections county in the best election state. So thank you. So while you're being pestered with all these questions, I wanted you to know people are appreciating what you're saying. What happens if a drop box has been tampered with or a ballot envelope? Are drop boxes monitored all the time? Is there security there?
No. Okay. So let me take them in order. In the 8 years I've been in Whatcom County, and in the 2.5 years I was at Island County, we've never had vandalism of a drop box. But in the event, we did have an instance where it appeared that the back of the box did not get latched completely, and that wasn't from vandalism, it was a failure of the lock, which now we've corrected that with heavier duty locks on all of our boxes. But in that particular case, the police called the prior auditor, and because someone had called them and said that the back of the box was open and the ballots were all in there. But anyway, some police called Debbie, and she went out with her husband. And what we did is we sequestered those ballots. So we had to take them to canvas board and explain the situation and say the back was open, but the ballots were sitting in there. It doesn't appear they've been tampered with, and the canvas board had to vote to make the determination that we could count them. So that's what happened in that case. If a box was tampered with, if there'd been vandalism to it, one, we'd call the police. So that would be the first thing. So there'd be a police report, or the sheriff, depending on where it was located. I would get contacted. We would go through the same process. So one, we'd get, law enforcement to investigate. And then, we have to get canvas board involved to figure out what the next steps are. It's like, well, what is the vandalism? What, some places have had people, for example, they get mad, so they literally back up a semi 4x4 into the ballot box. I mean, they don't tamper with the ballots. They just damage the box. We are doing. In this election, we're checking the boxes every day. We're emptying them every day, which we don't normally do. So we will be out at all the boxes at least once. I've asked law enforcement to do drive-bys just to keep their eyes on the boxes, just to see, because we've heard there may be activity around the drop boxes on election day. And that's okay. People can do that if they want to be there and stand and watch or observe or whatever, but we just need to make sure that they're not prohibiting somebody from voting, creating a, disturbance and blocking the way and that kind of thing. So, we will be asking law enforcement to drive by, and actually I'm going to hire security, which I don't normally do, partly because we've gotten, there's buzz out there that everybody's interested and potentially they want to invalidate vote by mail, and I think it's just good practice. So I'll have a roving security person, and I think at the really large boxes we're going to have plainclothes, private security presence, not law enforcement with guns and things, at the boxes, just keeping an eye and making sure that people are staying back 25 feet because they can't be leaning against the box or doing that kind of stuff. So yeah, so that's what we'll be doing for drop box security.
Okay. So I assume it's too late to request an early ballot, but you can go ahead and print it from Vote if you didn't get your ballot. I mean, how does that work?
Yeah, you
can
can
wait to see if you get one.
If you don't get one, after the 14th, Vote will be available for people to get ballots. So if somebody still could do it, if they just woke up and go, oh, I'm going to be leaving and on Saturday, and I'm not going to be home. I know my ballot's getting mailed, but I'm not going to be home. They could request an early ballot, or on the 14th, they could go online. And what you do is you log in with your voter credentials, your name and your birth date, and you get into your voter record, and then you just say access ballot, and it will let you get into your ballot. You can mark it online, you print it out, sign the affidavit. You can staple it together and put it in a drop box, so you can mail it back. So people can do that. If they think if something's going to happen and they're not going to be at home and they can't wait if they think it's going to be a week, before they get their ballot and they need one now. Well, I think we've still got people accessing early ballots. Actually, we get a few phone calls.
Okay. Well, it sounds to me like it's a pretty good system and that things are going to go well. You've made you've given us a lot of information. I really appreciate that, and that, so I thank you for all of that. As you can imagine, this is an extremely busy time for the auditor's office, and we're so appreciative of you coming and taking the time to talk with us today. I think we all have a larger appreciation of how the vote is counted, how it's monitored, how everything goes. And this will be up on the City Club YouTube as well as on the website. So I hope everybody will be sure and refer your friends as they have questions about voting. And I just wanted to say again, Maureen mentioned our next program is November 11th, which is early because of Dave Zirin's schedule. So put that on your schedule. And thank you again so much. This has been a real public service, and I don't think I have to remind this audience, vote early. Your vote is your voice. Thanks for attending.